Are you a CEO that wears the superhuman pants, that everything defaults back to you, the decisions? Now, not necessarily purposefully, not necessarily by design, but actually just it's the way things have turned out. Kind of like, I'm the only one that really knows everything that's going on in the business, and you kind of like, if you want to know, then you come to me. And that might even go down to the level that your clients are phoning you up directly. Now, I've been working with business owners and executives for over a decade now, and I've seen this on multiple occasions where the CEO is the default for everything. The CEO is at the center of everything that goes on, even to the point where a CEO will have a board of directors or a senior leadership team and still finds himself in that same place. But there was a lesson from my military days, and it's something that I teach any CEO, any managing director, any business owner that I work with. And it focuses around mission command. So what is mission command? In the very simplest terms, mission command from the military days was the ability to ensure that everybody in the unit, from grassroots all the way through to the senior command, understood what the mission was. Now, you could think that that's kind of like, well, we've got to go big here, we've got to go large. What's the size of the mission? We're looking at a battalion or a division or, something of that nature. And yes, you'd be right. And if you look at it in the business context, it's kind of like, what's the long-term mission? Where are we heading? And yes, you'd be right. But the reality of this was actually, as that cascades down, it means that is dissolves to the point where I'm working at grassroots level and I know what the mission is. So that shapes my actions. It shapes my decisions. It shapes what I do and how I do it. Now, in business today, much of that is shaped by the CEO. So there's poor delegation. And what I mean by that is there's probably more of a case that we delegate stuff than outcomes. But when we start to focus on mission command, when we start to develop what the mission is, now we don't need to go long term. And if you've never done this before, maybe try this at your next meeting. It's kind of like, what is the mission for this next week? Or what's the mission for this month? Or dare I even say, what's the mission for today? But when you do that, is be really clear in how you express that to your team, to your senior leadership team, to your management, to your board. So they understand implicitly what it is that they've got to go and achieve. Now, within the parameters of that, there's a lot of other stuff that goes on. And if you jump onto my website or follow any of the stuff that I do, then I'll talk about that in a little bit more depth. But suffice to say that you then make sure that you've got resource of time, team, finance. So that there's clarity in that. You have rules of the game in place and what they can and can't do. And actually, when they do need to default back to you, because it is a decision that you need to make and not just the next step towards getting to where you want them to get to. But you give them enough autonomy to actually be able to go out there and do what they need to do. And so the moment we start to focus on this, the moment you start to get clear on where it is and what you want to do, and whether you write that as a mission statement, you deliver it as a mission, and then everybody understands what that mission is, you start to evoke mission command. Now, you don't need to call it mission command, and that might confuse people in business. But if you give them the clarity of the objective, what it is that we're striving to achieve, that's the mission. Then resource it. Then give them the constraints of time, team, and money, and then actually let them get on with it and trust them to do it. Now, you know your team better than anybody else, so you can determine what that looks like. But if you start to evoke mission command, if you start to look at developing the mission going forward, you're going to see a real spike in productivity. You're going to see much greater delegation throughout the team because you're going to be educating the team on how to do it yourself. And you're going to have the headspace to start to focus on the scalability and the strategic direction of your business, of where it is and what it is you want to achieve. So, there you have it. Mission command. Have a look at it. Do it today, for a week, for a month, and see where it takes you. Have a great day.